This is a video presentation of Chapter 6, Section 4 in the 7th grade textbook entitled Percent of a Number. Now, as you can see right off the bat here, it looks like a lot of things have disappeared from the original presentation, and indeed they have. What the book does here is they try and teach you a whole bunch of different ways that involve formulas to solve these questions, and we don't really need to do that. It's actually much simpler than that. Now, as far as the questions go, you can see the questions look a lot like what we saw yesterday. What the difference is here is that estimate idea has dropped off, and we're finding the actual values here, the actual responses. You can use those techniques that we used yesterday with the 10% and the 5% and the 1% to solve a lot of these questions, probably without ever picking up a calculator. But you can use a calculator here to help you find the actual percents of the numbers. So, some keywords you're going to see here. Really, the big keyword is the word of. Reminder that the word of implies multiplication. So, whenever we see of, we're going to change that to multiplication. Is, that would be really the presence of an equal sign, which we'll see more often in answers than anything. So, in the first one here, where they're asking me to find 30% of 50, what they really mean is to multiply together 30% and 50. Now, generally, you're not going to ever see me write 30% as 30%, because if I'm going to a calculator, I'm not going to go looking for that percent key. I'm going to change 30% into a decimal before I do that. And as you can see, that's what you see done here when we cross out all the little extras here that the book tried to teach us. 30% to a decimal. Well, remember, to change a percent to a decimal, you move the decimal 2 times to the left and remove the percent sign. So when I go twice to the left and get rid of the percent sign, that's 0.30, or just 0.3. So this is really 0.30 times, again, of changing to times 50. Well, when I do 0.30 times 50, I get 15. So 30% of 50 is simply 15. Here's 200% of 24. And again, the book is spending a lot of time going through extra steps and trying to make you learn some fractions and proportions here, things we don't need to do. It's much simpler than that. To find 200% of 24, we're going to multiply together 200% and 24. So change 200% into a decimal. So I'm going to get rid of the percent sign and move the decimal twice to the left. And that's going to be 2.00. And I'm going to multiply that by 24, which is what you can see I've written here. Well, when I take 2 and multiply it by 24, the result is 48. So 200% of 24 is 48. Now, all of a sudden, in number 2, they decide to teach us the way I've just shown you the first example. So let's go ahead and keep on doing exactly what we've been doing here. They're asking me to find 9% of 80. Well, again, with of meaning multiply, that means I'm multiplying together 9% and 80. So I'm going to take 9% and convert it to a decimal. Well, 9%, when I move that decimal twice to the left, as you can see, that second jump there happens to be an empty jump. Well, as you know, that means that's going to end up filling in with the 0 there. So that's going to give me 0.9, or 0.09 really, and I'm going to get rid of the percent sign, and that's 0.09 final. 9% changes into 0.09, multiplied by 80, and that's 7.2. So 9% of 80 is 7.2. Obviously, as you figured, these are great calculator questions, and that's probably exactly what you're doing, and that's absolutely fine. All right, go ahead and take a look at number 3. It says the estimated world population in 2001 was 6,157 million. About 40% of the people were 19 or younger. What was the approximate number of people 19 or younger to the nearest million? So 40% of the people were 19 or younger. Key part being right here, this 40% of. 40% of the 6,157 million. So I'm finding 40% of 6,157 million, or 40% times 6,157,000,000, which is what you can see is written out on the screen, and is a little bit different than your note-taking guide, where they just wrote 6,157 million as 6,157, because then they just wrote the word million after it. But as you can see, I'm showing this to you as the actual number. So 40%, again, I'm going to change that to a decimal, 0.40, get rid of the percent sign and move the decimal twice to the left. And with of meaning multiply, I'm doing 0.40 times 6,157 million there. And when I do that, the result turns out to be 2,462,800,000, which would be the same as 2,462,800,000, which they then round to say 2,500 million, which would be 2.5 billion, which is really close to our 2.4628 figure that we found in the previous line. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here at the check it out examples to finish this presentation. Number one, we're finding the percent of the number, 40% of 40. Now this is one that we could actually do really quickly with the estimating techniques we learned. Remember, when we found 10%, we took and moved the decimal in one time, so that would be 4. And since they're asking me to find 40%, I'm going to use 10% 4 times. 4 fours would be 16. Well, as you can see, when I solved this, I did 40% as 0.40 being multiplied by 40, since of means multiply, and notice the answer I got was 16. I actually did that faster with mental math than me going for the calculator. In number two, find the percent of the number and then estimating to check whether our answer is reasonable. 6% of 18. So 6% times 18 with of meaning multiply here. So 6% changes into 0.06, 2 to the left with the decimal and get rid of the percent sign. And then I'm multiplying by 18 and I end up with 1.08. Now then they're asking me to estimate to check whether my answer is reasonable. So we know 6% of 18 is 1.08. How are we going to estimate? Well, let's use our 10%, 5%, 1% rules, because 5%, being pretty close to 6%, should be a good estimate. Well, if I do 10%, that's going to move the decimal in one time. So that's going to give me 1.8. 5% is going to cut that figure in half. Now, if you're saying, I don't know how to cut 1.8 in half, well, think of it as 18 instead, and then just put the decimal in when you're done. If I say cut 18 in half, you absolutely know what to do. Cutting 18 in half gives me 9. Insert the decimal, and that's 0.9. Is 0.9, my 5% figure, close to this? Yes, that is pretty close to that. So our answer is reasonable. All right, number 3 is that same question from earlier, except they're asking it in a different way. They're saying the estimated population in 2001, again, was 6,157 million. And then they're saying 60% of the people were above 19 years of age. And they want to know what was the approximate number of people 19 or older to the nearest million. So we're taking that 6,157 million figure, 6,157,000,000, which is really 6,157,000,000, and finding 60% of it. Well, again, since of means multiply, that means I'm multiplying that by 60%, which, as you can see, I've written as 0.60 in its decimal form. Again, going twice to the left with the decimal and getting rid of the percent sign. Well, when I do that, I get 3,694,200,000, or approximately 3,500 million.